Okay, this is the guide for AQA GCSE Paper 2, which is poems from other cultures and writing to inform, explain, describe. And for the purposes of this video, I'm just going to focus on cluster 1, although the points would translate to either cluster. And these are the poems from cluster 1 in no particular order. But of course, like I said, most of the points about comparison and stuff would be applicable to both clusters. And the main thing you've got to do in this exam is compare, which is talking about similarities and differences and themes and things. And you've got to focus on the two big questions of how and why. And those are the two that the examiners will be looking for, even if they only ask you one of them in the question. Some of the things, obviously, that you should have learnt in your lessons and you're willing to talk about are these techniques, things like personification. There aren't many rhetorical questions, but sometimes they talk directly to you. That counts as the same thing. Juxtapositions, where they stick two things next to each other for an effect, and you can talk about the way it's laid out or the structure of the poem, like in what were they like. In the answer, I'd always take the key theme of the question, whatever that happens to be, and I would do 4 point, evidence, explain, development sections. So you're only looking for 4 comparisons in your essay. So you need roughly 4 quotes from each poem. Now for each PED or each section, you want your main comparative point, whatever that happens to be, and then you want a quote from each poem. Now if you can't get a quote from each, or you haven't got time, just focus on one and then bring in a comparison. And effectively for each one, you're going to explain it, and then you're going to do some analysis. You're going to pick out a word or a technique if there's one there, and talk about it. So let's take the question. Compare the ways the poets present pain and suffering in Limbo and one other poem. Now obviously your theme here is pain and suffering. It's given you one poem, and the obvious one to compare it to would be Vultures, but you could do Blessing, or you could do What Were They Like. So here are some of the things that I've just brainstormed straight away. Slavery, being trapped, fear, prejudice, appearance, and power. And then all I'm going to do is for each section, I'm going to take the first one, which is being trapped, and I've given a quote from each poem. So I've got a limbo stick is a silence in front of me, and rooted in a dump of gross feathers. That's from Vultures. Now all you want to do with each one is, rather than tell me what's happening and what it shows, you want to give your point, which is that obviously they are trapped on a slave ship. And then after that, you're going to look at something like, you could talk about the fact that it starts with and it's going on endlessly. You could talk about the word silence, the alliteration with stick, the fact that stick is used to beat them. Here's an example. In Limbo, the slaves are trapped on the ship and in a life of slavery. And then the quote, the limbo dance goes on endlessly, suggesting they are forced to be slaves for their whole lives. And then I would go on to say the word silence suggests, and that would be my development. This isn't an amazingly good example, but the fact that you're suggesting an interpretation of the limbo dance would still probably get you a C grade at this point if you compared it. In the next example, however, this is better. This is the start of something better. The ending, the stick is a metaphorical barrier, not just the limbo stick, represents power and entrapment. And then it would go on to develop with silence is also a weapon, because obviously they're not allowed to talk. That would be the start of a better answer, because you're actually linking your technique in there as well, which is the metaphor. Okay? Go back to the main thing, the PED. There's our theme. We've dealt with the first bit. The key bit for you, for any grade at CB, A star, would be comparing it and making some kind of relevant connection. So, whereas in Vultures, the vultures are trapped by their own appearance, because we know they don't have a choice, they're rooted in dump and gross feathers. The word rooted suggests they have no choice, and the emotions of dump and gross imply they are ugly and must live with it. Now you could link that into the culture that they come from, the Nazi commandant and the way that he doesn't have a choice in what he does. Or does he? It's up to you. You can say what you like as long as you back it up with specific words there. Some of the connectives, of course, you'll need to do that are flicking through the screen now. And don't worry too much about that, but it's good to vary. It just gives the examiners something to think about. If you consistently use the same structure all the time, like this suggests, this suggests, this suggests, it just bores them a little bit. And obviously you'll probably need therefore and in conclusion at some point. And that's finally what I'd suggest you do. Learn 4 quotes, really learn them from each poem so that you can talk about them irrespective of the theme, and go for those and focus on those and explain those.